If you're settling in for the night, welcome. This is boring history for sleepwear, forgotten details, quiet lives, and dusty old truths unfold slowly, gently, and without urgency. If these stories help you drift off, consider subscribing. It supports the channel and lets you return whenever sleep feels far away. And if you're still awake, let me know in the comments. What time is it where you are? And where in the world are you listening from? Now, close your eyes and let's begin. Asterisk, you lie in your chamber. A breeze rustles the linen curtains. The streets outside are quiet, save for the soft step of leather sandals on marble and the hush of market voices carried faintly from below. You're not a noblewoman, but tonight you are watching one. She's seated by the mirror in the top room of a domus on the Palatine Hill. Her name is Julia, and her fingers tremble slightly as she lifts the brush. A small jar rests beside her. It's a dull gray, almost like crushed seashells mixed with milk. But that is not what it is. It's lead. More precisely, cerussa, or white lead carbonate. It's been specially prepared for her at the local apothecary. The finest merchants import it from Massilia. It's been soaked in vinegar for days, then carefully dried and ground. This substance is both paste and poison, a cream that will grant her the death-white complexion that's fashionable among elite Roman women. She dips her fingers again, dabbing the mixture onto her cheeks, her chin, her brow. Her skin has begun to flake this week. There are red sores along her jawline. Last month, her gums bled for 3 days. But to her, that is nothing. She must appear flawless, not only because she is a senator's daughter, but because her appearance signals her virtue, her status, her self-control. In Rome, the paler the skin, the higher the class. Tanned skin is laborer's skin. Pale skin is for those who live indoors, who avoid the sun, who can afford servants and shade. But of course, beauty in Rome is never natural. It is always performed, layered, distilled. Cerussa is just one part of the regimen. She also uses stibium, or powdered antimony, as eyeliner. It's ground to a metallic black and mixed with oil, then applied to the lashes and brows. For blush, she favors cinnabar, a deep vermilion pigment made from mercury or dot. It smells faintly of iron and vinegar, blood and metal. Sometimes the scent makes her dizzy. Other times it makes her eyes water. None of this is unusual. In fact, it's expected. The Roman world is not ignorant of poison. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They are experts in it. Their physicians know which plants to avoid. Their philosophers write about toxins and antidotes. But when it comes to beauty, the danger is ignored. Perhaps because the slow death of a woman is never considered a public crisis. Her complexion is praised. Her cheeks are admired. No one comments on the swelling round her jaw or the small, persistent tremor in her right hand. There are even recipes published for these mixtures. Pliny the Elder, in his natural history, lists several. Cerussa is used to whiten the skin, but must be prepared with great care, lest it become too biting. He warns of its harshness, but still records it as commonplace. Ovid, in his Medicamina, Faciae Feminae, offers poems to guide women in beautifying their faces. He suggests barley, eggs, and honey, but even these gentle masks are laced with substances that strip the skin's natural oils and weaken its protective layer. And then there are imported substances. From the east comes armenium, a copper-based pigment. From Africa, ochre. From Gaul, powdered chalk. But none are as desired as cerussa, which grants a smooth alabaster finish and seeps quietly into the bloodstream. The irony, of course, is that noble Roman women, like Julia, are expected to maintain this look without appearing vain. Vanity is for prostitutes. Modesty is for wives and daughters. So Julia must rise before the house stirs. Her slave girl grinds the powders and warms the oils. The mirror is polished bronze. It reflects her not quite as she is, but enough to shape the illusion. By the time she steps out into the atrium, veiled and modest, her face is a canvas of contradictions, painted in minerals that will eventually rot her gums, stain her teeth, weaken her bones, and swell her abdomen with internal bleeding. And yet, she will be praised for her grace. Other women envy her appearance. Some ask what soap she uses. The answer is none. She does not wash her face. She cannot. Water cracks the mask. The white lead sits in her pores day and night. Some nights she applies fresh layers without removing the old. The sores itch. The skin thickens. But she continues, because in her world, to appear natural is the same as appearing poor. And no one wants to marry a poor woman, or a woman who looks like one, outside her door. Rome rumbles on. The senators bicker. The legions march. The Colosseum is under construction. Gladiators sharpen their blades. But inside the villa, Julia continues her morning ritual. Brush, dab, blend. Poison, praise, repeat. And far from being a rare case, she is typical. Her neighbors, her cousins, even her slaves mimic her methods to lesser degrees. But only the wealthy can afford the purest form of these powders, and thus only the wealthy suffer the full brunt of their consequences. The question is never asked aloud, but it lingers in the silence of the morning routine. What does it mean when a woman must choose between being beautiful and being well? Or worse, when she no longer even sees it as a choice? Julia is not alone. There are thousands like her across the Roman Empire, from the port cities of Hispania to the noble villas of Asia Minor. The face of a Roman noblewoman is not her own. It is manufactured, cultivated, and in time corroded by her pursuit of the ideal complexion. By the 1st century AD, cerussa is a luxury commodity. It travels from the mines of Greece and Spain to the workshops of Roman chemists. The finest varieties are white, chalky, and dense, almost like cake frosting when mixed with oils and fats. Some are stored in delicate bone jars, others in glass containers etched with a woman's initials. Cosmetic tables or toilet tables are symbols of wealth in Roman households. A high-born woman's table might contain tiny mortar and pestles, spatulas for mixing creams, small flasks for rose water, and brushes of fine animal hair for applying blush or powder. These tables are not private spaces. They are public stages within the home, open to the scrutiny of female visitors, family members, and slaves. A woman's beauty ritual is evidence of her discipline. It is aesthetic hygiene, the daily purification of her skin, her voice, her posture, all of which reflect her family's dignity. To neglect it would be shameful, but to enjoy it too openly would be scandalous. This is the strange burden Roman women carry. The poison is slow. That's what makes it so tolerable. Sarusa doesn't strike like a dagger or a spoiled oyster. Instead, it accumulates. It seeps through. The skin settles in the bones and disrupts the nervous system. Long before death, there are symptoms: insomnia, nausea, headaches, muscle weakness, and eventual infertility. It is well documented, though not in the language we would use today, in Roman medical texts. The symptoms of lead poisoning are called plumbic cachexia, wasting caused by lead. But such terms are often reserved for men who work with the metal in industry. Women, on the other hand, are rarely studied as subjects. Their symptoms are brushed aside as hysteria, faintness, or a natural fragility of the female body. A woman's collapse is often attributed to her nature, not her makeup. Even when physicians like Cyrannus of Ephesus write about female health, their focus is mostly reproductive. Cyrannus notes that women should avoid strong fumes and substances near the face, as they may disturb the menses, but there is no direct condemnation of Sarusa or cinnabar. The beauty ritual remains a private cause with public consequences, and medicine doesn't intervene, and perhaps no one wants it to. The societal expectation is relentless. A noble woman is a symbol. Her skin must look unworked. Her hands must be smooth. Her voice must never rise in public. Every part of her, especially her face, must suggest that she is untouched by toil, even if she manages her household, raises children, educates slaves, and tends to sick relatives. She must appear effortless. This leads to strange contradictions. For example, many Roman women of status maintain personal libraries. They read Greek texts, exchange philosophical letters, and even write poetry. Yet they are also expected to feign ignorance when it comes to their appearance. If someone compliments Julia's complexion, she is not to say, "Thank you, I spent an hour blending." Instead, she must murmur that she has not slept well, or that she has no secrets at all. Beauty is meant to appear accidental, even when achieved through calculated poisoning. There is an added cruelty in how the ideal shifts over time. In earlier Roman centuries, natural tones were more acceptable. Women wore subtle ochres or saffron on the cheeks. But with the expansion of the empire and the arrival of Eastern influences, including Egyptian and Persian cosmetics, the bar for noble beauty rises. Foreign queens like Cleopatra VII are idolized not just for their power, but for their elaborate beauty regimens. Rumors spread of her bathing in donkey milk, using crushed pearls as exfoliant, and coating her skin in gold leaf. Whether true or not, the effect is clear. The richer the ritual, the more seductive the image. And Roman women, always cautious not to appear to Greek or to Egyptians, begin borrowing selectively from these trends, adopting the exoticism while masking it in Roman modesty. The result, a new aesthetic emerges, one that is hyper-controlled, pale to the point of death, and wholly dependent on imported substances that no one fully understands. The more toxic the cream, the more elite the woman using it. Julia's cousin, Pamelia, illustrates the danger in another way. She lives in Ostia, near the harbor, and has access to the latest products from the East. Her household slaves are trained in complex grooming rituals. Twice a week, she uses a mask of vinegar and lead ash, applied at night, rinsed only with goat milk in the morning. Within a year, she begins to lose her eyebrows. Her skin reddens and cracks. Her maid suggests switching to a gentler formula, but Amelia refuses. She insists it's just an adjustment phase. 6 months later, she faints during a family gathering. Doctors are summoned. They suggest she is weak-willed. She's told to rest, to eat more figs, to take short walks in the garden. But no one removes the beauty table from her room. No one stops the routine. To do so would risk looking like a peasant. Eventually, Amelia becomes infertile. She begins bleeding irregularly. Her eyesight weakens. Her fingers twitch involuntarily. And still, the routine continues, because her reflection still looks acceptable. This is the heart of the contradiction. Women's health is sacrificed in silence for an appearance that feigns vitality. They are falling apart inside, but their faces remain smooth. There are quiet warnings in society, stories passed between midwives and servants, whispers in the bathhouses, jokes in the market. She's got the white death. Someone might say of a particularly pale woman with sunken eyes. But these warnings are never formalized. There is no ban, no medical decree, because what truly matters is how a woman looks when she dies, not whether her appearance helped bring her there. By the 2nd century AD, the trend continues. Sarusa becomes more refined. Vendors add perfumes to mask the vinegar. Some begin blending it with crushed pearls, ambergris, or sandalwood to create signature scents. Elite Roman women, those who survive their 20s, often carry the signs of internal poisoning by age, and yet portraits from the time continue to depict them with glowing, pale faces. Not because it was healthy, but because it was expected. The marble statues, the frescoes on villa walls, the busts carved for remembrance, they all preserve this image, beauty as sickness, elegance as erosion, dot in time. When Julia's daughter reaches adolescence, she will inherit the same rituals, the same jars, the same brush, by the same expectations, and perhaps the same quiet suffering. But in the silence of these rooms, where no one speaks of toxicity and everyone praises the paleness, one might ask, how long does it take before pain becomes a tradition? Asterisk years pass, and Julia's face begins to change, not in the way one expects with age, the slow, softened drift of time, but more like a fabric stretched too tightly, too often, until it begins to fray. The thin skin under her eyes sags ever so slightly. Her jaw stiffens, not from disuse, but from the underlying decay of tissue inside. Her body is quietly unraveling. There is no ceremony to it, no sudden revelation, no moment where Julia looks in the mirror and says, "This is what did it." That's the cruelty of it. The white lead never announces itself. It simply enters the blood, clings to the bones, and lingers. When her hands tremble, she says it is the weather. When her head aches, she blames the lighting. When her gums bleed, she tells the physician she has been eating too many figs. None of these are lies, exactly. They are simply the allowed explanations, the ones that do not threaten the structure of her world. Because to blame the cream, the powder, the regimen is to blame the very system that shaped her. And in Rome, systems are sacred. Elsewhere, in the empire, women suffer the same fate. In Gaul, a young noblewoman named Claudia is buried with her beauty table. Among the funerary goods are jars of lead cream and brushes carved from ivory. Her epitaph reads, "Pia et pulchra," dutiful and beautiful. In Syria, an upper-class widow donates her estate to a temple. In her written will, preserved in wax tablets, she details how her beauty regimen was a reflection of divine discipline. Her use of Sarusa, she wrote, was a sacrifice of flesh for the appearance of serenity. There's something haunting in that beauty framed as suffering, suffering reframed as devotion. By the 3rd century, there are growing murmurings among certain physicians. A few Galenic practitioners begin advising against daily use of lead-based cosmetics. They write in cautious tones, noting the wearing effect of certain powders on the vitality of the face. But the advice rarely reaches the women who need it. Even if it did, what would change? Sarusa is still sold in markets, praised in poems, admired on statues. It remains embedded not only in ritual, but in architecture. In frescoes across Pompeii and Herculaneum, many preserved by the ash of Vesuvius, female figures are depicted holding mirrors, applying powder, dabbing at their cheeks, always mid-process, always in pursuit. The face is never enough. It must be altered, coated, softened, elevated. It must reflect a life above labor, even as it disintegrates from the inside in her later years. Julia becomes less social. She spends more time in the upper rooms of the villa. Her daughter has taken over the family's social obligations. Her maid now prepares the creams with a lighter hand. There are fewer guests, fewer festivals. The world outside shifts. New emperors, new laws, new unrest. But in her mirror, the face remains pale. The cracks beneath are hidden. She rarely speaks of the rituals anymore. They are no longer a choice, but a condition, something fused into her very sense of self. And perhaps that is the most chilling part. Not the poison itself, but the way it becomes a quiet friend. A routine that asks nothing but patience. A death that does not come suddenly, but politely, as if waiting its turn. Julia dies in her sleep. Sometime near the calends of May, her body is prepared for burial with care. Her face is touched up one final time. The attendants apply a gentle white powder to her cheeks, out of respect, tradition, and appearance. She is buried with her jewelry, her tablets, and her beauty table. No one comments on the sores inside her mouth, or the stiffness in her hands, or the swelling near her liver. They speak instead of her calmness, her poise, her beauty, they say. She kept herself well. Centuries later, archaeologists will uncover graves like hers. They will find traces of clay, of lead around the skull. Dusts of cerussa embedded in the soil, residue inside ivory containers. The evidence will speak, finally, not in whispers, but in minerals. They will analyze the bones and measure the lead content. They will confirm what those women never dared name. But even then, it may not matter, because the practice continues in other forms. In the 16th century, Venetian women will revive cerussa. They will call it Venetian white. They will apply it for the same reason Julia did, to appear higher in status, further from the sun, closer to heaven. And they, too, will rot from the inside out. There is a strange dignity in the way these women endured it. Not because it was noble, but because it was normalized. The rituals were not chosen, not discussed, not questioned. They were performed in silence, passed down like recipes, preserved like heirlooms. Beauty became a quiet inheritance of suffering, and in every age that followed, the poisons changed. But the question remained the same. When does a ritual stop being beautiful and start being a sentence? Asterisk, you are standing at the edge of a canal. The water laps gently against the worn stone. Gondolas drift past, their oars slicing through the lagoon in slow, practiced arcs. Above you, laundry flutters from high windows. A faint scent of rosewater and damp wool hangs in the air. This is Venice. Sometime in the late 16th century, a city of masks, mirrors, and quiet vanities. And here, within its narrow alleys and silk-draped boudoirs, a new standard of beauty is being perfected. One so alluring that queens, duchesses, and noble courtesans from across Europe will attempt to copy it. The signature look, snow-white skin, blood-red lips, glassy eyes framed in soot-black kohl. It is the era of Venetian cerusse, a beauty cream so refined, so pure in appearance, that it becomes the envy of Europe. But behind its pristine sheen lies the same old poison. To understand how it began, we must start with the beauty houses of Venice. Quiet shops run by chemists and merchants who sell powders, salves, perfumes, and tinctures to the wealthy women of the lagoon. In these shops, jars of cerusse line the walls. But unlike the rough pastes of ancient Rome, this is a more luxurious substance. Venetian ceruse is manufactured with extreme care. White lead is corroded with vinegar vapor, purified, dried, then mixed with oils, waxes, and scented waters. The final product resembles whipped cream, soft, luminous, and nearly iridescent in candlelight. This is not just a cosmetic, it is a status symbol. To wear Venetian ceruse is to declare that you do not labor outdoors, that you need not be touched by sun or by time. It is skin without blood. It is beauty without heat. It is health made still, and it is profoundly toxic. Women apply it layer by layer dot, sometimes with delicate brushes made from squirrel hair, other times with pads of lamb's wool or fingertips dipped in rose oil. It coats the face, neck, and sometimes even the shoulders and chest, any area that might be seen beneath the wide necklines of courtly gowns. Then comes the powdering. Ground starch or chalk is applied to set the cream, creating a matte finish. It dulls the natural oils and gives the skin a velvety texture. Rouge is added to the cheeks, often made from cochineal, a crushed insect, pigment imported from the New World. And the lips are painted with a mix of wax, cinnabar, and sometimes even a hint of carmine or sulfur. The transformation is breathtaking, from ordinary skin to marble-like, perfection, from living warmth to cold, elegance, but the longer one wears it, the more damage it causes. Elizabeth I of England, arguably the most famous user of Venetian ceruse, popularizes the look across Europe. She begins applying the cream following her bout with smallpox in 1562. The illness leaves her face pockmarked and scarred. Venetian ceruse offers a solution. It hides her imperfections and restores her image as the Virgin Queen, a figure untouched, untouchable, and perpetually pale. For years, she applies it religiously. So do her courtiers, her ladies, and noblewomen across England, France, and the Low Countries. But over time, the lead builds up beneath the skin. The pores become inflamed. The skin thins. The face bruises easily and recovers slowly. Some women develop sores that refuse to heal. Others lose their hair. Their eyebrows fall out. Teeth loosen. Gums recede. Fingers stiffen. And yet, none of these symptoms are associated with the cream, not openly. Instead, they are explained as side effects of age, of melancholy, of female constitution. And so the cream continues to be sold, applied, praised, because what matters is how a woman looks today, not what may happen to her in 10 years. There is a quiet cruelty in how these cosmetics are marketed. Venetian merchants never advertise the ingredients directly. They offer vague descriptions for the enhancement of complexion or to renew the skin with brightness and freshness. Some recipes include crushed pearl. Others claim to be made with milk and almond oil. But the true base white lead, B, is always present. It is the only substance that provides the opacity and finish that wealthy women demand. Even physicians of the time are divided. Some, like Girolamo Mercurio, caution against prolonged use, noting the swelling of glands and the numbness of fingers in habitual users. But others, especially those paid by noble families, describe the effects as minor inconveniences, or worse, as signs of an overly delicate spirit. And once again, as in ancient Rome, the line between health and beauty blurs into silence. In the upper chambers of a Venetian palazzo, a woman named Contessa Leonora Balbi prepares for an evening gathering. She is 42. Her mirror is framed in ivory and gold leaf. A soft candle glows beside her, illuminating her face as her maid applies the first layer of ceruse. Leonora winces slightly. Her skin is tender today. There's a small fissure near her left temple, a sore that's refused to close. But she says nothing. The party tonight is important. A foreign ambassador will be present. She must look immaculate. The brush strokes continue. Then come the blush, the powder, the scent, and at last the transformation is complete to the world. She appears serene, composed, and radiant. Only her maid sees the discarded cloths, stained with traces of blood. Only her physician, weeks later, will note the rising fever and the fatigue. That won't subside. Only the mirror will reflect the cost of her glow. The popularity of Venetian ceruse only grows, even after multiple women begin showing signs of lead palsy, a type of progressive muscle weakness caused by poisoning the fashion continues. Because the more elite women suffer these symptoms, the more exclusive the practice becomes. Illness, in a twisted way, becomes a mark of class. Pale skin with a slight tremor. She must be noble, a voice that falters. She's not weak, she's refined. And so the sickness spreads, not just physically, but culturally. And even those who suspect the truth do not dare speak it aloud. What happens, then, to a society where the very thing that defines beauty is? What slowly disfigures the body? What happens when the highest aspiration for a woman is a face emptied of life? Claire. And how long can such a standard survive before it crumbles under the weight of its own deception? Asterisk, the Contessa Leonora Balbi lies in bed. The window shutters are drawn tight. Even the gondoliers outside seem to row more quietly today. Inside her palazzo, the oil lamp flickers in a corner. Her hand, resting on a linen pillow, trembles in small, irregular movements. Her lips are dry. Her once smooth voice now brittle cracks when she whispers to her maid for more water. She is not dying, not yet, but her body is revolting subtly, silently, and without mercy, and no one can quite explain why. The city around her remains absorbed in its rituals. In Venice, beauty is not merely personal, it is political. The image of its women reflects the wealth of its merchant class, the sophistication of its diplomacy, and the civility of its salons. When a foreign emissary visits, he is greeted not just with trade agreements and banquets, but with a curated vision of Venetian elegance, delicately powdered and perfumed. Leonora is one of many who sustain that illusion. To do so, she follows a routine as precise as any priest's. The day begins with milk and rosewater rinses. Then the base layer of cirrus, soft, white, and thick. Powdered pearls for extra sheen. Pink rouge for warmth. Kohl for definition. A small dab of civet oil behind the ears, followed by ambergris if she expects guests. The final step, a silk veil to protect it all until she arrives at her destination. And yet her skin has thinned. Her cheeks no longer flush on their own. Her gums ache. Her eyes burn in the morning. Her fingers, always delicate, now struggle to hold a fan without twitching. She has stopped writing letters. The ink stains her fingertips. The tremor makes her signature illegible. Her physician blames vapors. He prescribes warm broth, massages, and more time indoors. No one says the word lead. Meanwhile, in Elizabethan England, the Virgin Queen grows increasingly isolated. Visitors to the court remark that she only appears in low lighting. Her wigs are heavier. Her posture stiffens. When she speaks, it is with carefully rehearsed calm. She still dazzles, but her vitality flickers. Dimmed. One ambassador from France writes home. Her skin is like marble. Her expression no longer moves. He means it as a compliment. The secret is not really a secret anymore. By the end of the 1500s, apothecaries and surgeons have begun privately warning noble clients. They do not publish pamphlets. They do not risk angering powerful families. But within professional circles, the danger of cosmetic lead is well known. In Venice, the government takes small steps. Certain merchants are ordered to label their powders more clearly. Some formulas are quietly pulled from sale. But enforcement is lax. Demand is high. The social pressure to conform remains unyielding, and the poisons remain. Leonora's niece, Isabetta, is 17 and newly betrothed. She is eager, curious, and utterly devoted to the image of womanhood presented to her. She watches her aunt's beauty rituals with reverence. She imitates them. The stiffness of her aunt's limbs is not a warning to her. It is a badge of glamour. In her eyes. To suffer for beauty is not tragic. It is elevated. She once asked her aunt, half-jokingly, "Would you rather be sick and stunning, or healthy and plain?" Leonora didn't answer. She merely smiled and applied another layer of cream. That is the twisted truth of the era. The more visibly ill a woman becomes, the more delicate she appears, and the more refined her beauty seems. Sickness becomes seductive, a chalky face. She must be noble, translucent hands, a sure sign of wealth. Fainting spells, the privilege of a woman who never labors. So, even as the signs of poisoning become impossible to ignore, the sun sensitivity, the sores, the organ distress, they are reinterpreted through the lens of fashion, not suffering, but sacrifice, not symptoms, but style. By the early 1600s, the worst cases begin to be recorded. An English lady of the court is said to have lost most of her teeth before the age of 30, with deep ulcers beneath the jaw. A Venetian noblewoman is documented as having sudden fits of rage, a condition her doctors attribute to an excess of moist humors. It is likely lead-induced encephalopathy. Even the children of women who used Cirrus during pregnancy begin showing signs of developmental delay and poor immune function. But the connection is never officially made, because how could it be? To admit that Cirrus is deadly would be to admit that fashion kills, that beauty is built on decay, that the softest hands are coated in chemical rot. And such a truth is simply too large, too inconvenient to name. Leonora, now unable to attend social functions, receives fewer visitors. She spends her days in bed. Her maid, faithful and quiet, still applies the powder every morning. It soothes her to be seen in full makeup. Even in solitude, she reads less. She speaks little. Her meals are bland, her body cool to the touch. And yet, the mirror still flatters her. That is, perhaps the most haunting part. Her appearance, preserved by the very thing destroying her, still resembles the ideal. Her skin, though brittle, still glows faintly in the light. Her lips, though dry, still bloom with color. She is, in a way, the perfect illusion, a beautiful shell. Isabetta inherits her mirror when Leonora passes away. She places it on her own vanity, by, and begins to use it. The maid who once tended Leonora now serves the niece. She prepares the same creams, the same powders, the same rituals. She says nothing, because in this world, beauty is not improved. It is replicated. It is passed down like a sickness, like a dowry, like a curse. In the last decades of the 1600s, the powder room became both sanctuary and stage. The Venetian palazzo was not a place of idle beauty. Behind the velvet drapes and marble fountains, rituals of refinement unfolded in careful silence. The brush, on the cheek, the layer of white paste, the stillness of the maid's hand, the small silver spoon used to scoop a dollop of cream. And in the center of it all stood the mirror, unblinking, obedient, and final. The mirror never refused a face. The mirror never commented on swelling, trembling, or lesions. The mirror only offered confirmation. You are pale. You are smooth. You are worthy. Isabetta's generation perfected what Leonora's merely practiced by 1670. Venetian Cirrus had reached a new level of prestige. Chemists boasted of purer lead, smoother bases, gentler oils. A new formula even included powdered mother-of-pearl, not because it improved the product, but because it made women feel they were wearing pearls on their face. The marketing had become more elegant, but the ingredients remained unchanged: lead, vinegar, animal fat. What changed most was the culture of silence. Where Leonora may have discussed fatigue or headaches behind closed doors, Isabetta and her friends avoided the subject entirely. Illness was now a matter of bad breeding, not shared suffering. If you grew ill, it was because your body was weak, not because the cream was poisonous. The blame was internalized, and that, more than the cream itself, was the true achievement of Venetian beauty culture. It taught women to take responsibility for their own ruin, and to do so with grace. There are records tucked in the ledgers of apothecaries, in the scribbled notes of traveling physicians, of women who protested. One such woman, the daughter of a Venetian glassmaker, refused to wear cerus after her elder sister died at 28. The sister's body had bloated, her face mottled with sores. The family held a private funeral, and afterward forbade discussion of cosmetics in the home. The younger sister chose to live with a bare face. She was ridiculed at balls. She was called the washerwoman's daughter. At Mass, older women whispered that she looked sickly because she looked alive. One suitor even asked if her family had fallen into debt. Why else would she appear so plain? Eventually, she married a Genoese merchant and left Venice. But her name appears again, years later, in the notes of an English diplomat who described her as startling in her health. A woman of 40 who bore none of the fashionable symptoms. Even so, her story was the exception, not the rule. Venetian cerus would go on to shape beauty standards in France, England, and the Low Countries. In Versailles, Madame de Pompadour and her contemporaries favored variations of the cream. In London, actresses and aristocrats wore it on stage and at court. In Austria, the Empress Maria Theresa's daughters used it in portraits. Their skin rendered moon-like, their expressions doll-like. But as the 18th century unfolded, science began to intrude. Chemists started measuring the actual content of cosmetics. New publications warned against facial paralysis, birth defects, and chronic stomach pain among cerus users. Some doctors even took samples from deceased noblewomen and confirmed extreme lead levels in bone and blood. Even monarchs could not ignore the consequences forever. In 1760, the British Royal Society issued a formal warning about lead-based makeup in Paris. The Académie de Médecine published concerns about facial creams that render the appearance angelic but poison the blood of the wearer. Still, fashion dies slowly. Even as public awareness grew, many women chose to continue. Why? Because there was no acceptable alternative. Because plainness was equated with poverty. Because youth was equated with whiteness. Because a woman's face was her fortune. And perhaps because mirrors do not ask questions. They simply reward routine. Isabetta would eventually become a matriarch. She bore 3 children. Only one survived infancy. Her letters in later life, brittle scraps preserved in a family archive, reference her trembling hands and poor appetite. She rarely appeared in public by her 50s. Her last portrait shows her seated, veiled, with powdered skin and a distant gaze. There is a small vase of flowers beside her, a fan resting on her knee, and a jar of cerus barely visible in the lower corner of the painting, as if left there accidentally. But perhaps that's the most honest part of the image. Not the painted cheek, not the tightly bound corset, not the composed smile, but the jar in the corner, the poison in plain sight, the truth that was always within reach, yet never fully named. Venetian cirrus would eventually fall out of favor. By the 1800s, fashions shifted toward more natural tones. Concerns over toxicity became too loud to ignore. New products, zinc-based, creams, glycerin blends, and vegetable powders took its place. But the legacy of the white mask remained. The idea that beauty must erase signs of labor, that a woman's face must glow without warmth, that perfection is best achieved through discipline, artifice, and pain. These ideas linger in new forms, with new names, with new jars. So when we study Venetian cirrus, not just the product, but the culture around it, we must ask, was the poison ever truly in the cream? Or was it in the mirror that said, "You are only beautiful if you suffer"? Asterisk, you are standing on the edge of a corridor lined with silk lanterns. The scent of sandalwood lingers in the air. A lute plucks faintly from another room. It is evening in Tang Dynasty China, sometime around the early 9th century, and the city of Chang'an is preparing for yet another night of poetry. Bin, sense, and illusion that in the inner chambers of the Yongle Pavilion, a group of women prepare for their audience. They are not servants, not wives, not concubines, exactly. They are courtesans, highly trained women of letters, dance, music, and conversation. They serve at the edge of power, admired and feared, exalted and dispossessed, and, above all, they are watched. Every movement, every gesture, every tone of voice is rehearsed. Every feature of their face, sculpted to meet the current ideal of Tem beauty, must reflect elegance, refinement, and effortless allure. And that includes the blush. The signature red tint on the cheeks is not rose or berry. It is cinnabar, a compound formed from mercury sulfide, mined from the earth, ground into a fine powder, and mixed with oil or animal fat. It becomes a deep red pigment known as drusha. Drusha. It is sacred in Taoist rituals. It is used in calligraphy inks. It is applied to the faces of the most admired women in China, and it is quietly lethal in Tangira medical texts. Cinnabar is praised for its mystical properties. It is said to grant longevity, spiritual clarity, and even immortality if consumed in small doses and balanced correctly with other ingredients. But used incorrectly, it kills. Even the Taoist alchemists who worked with cinnabar in pursuit of elixirs knew of its dual nature. Too much, and it confuses the mind. Too often, and it corrupts the blood. But beauty, as always, is blind to moderation. The courtesans of Chang'an wore cinnabar on the cheeks, lips, and sometimes even on the forehead in the shape of small red dots known as huodian. These dots were pressed onto the skin with moistened paper or stamped using silk pads. Each woman had her own pattern, a personal signature, as recognizable as her voice. The blush itself, the crimson that warmed the face, had a meaning beyond mere ornamentation. It suggested vitality. It imitated the flush of youth, desire, planned good health. It softened expressions in candlelight and caught the eye in shadowed rooms. But unlike the blushes made from flowers or crushed stones, cinnabar clung deeply to the skin. Pitch particles embedded in pores, passed into the bloodstream through broken capillaries, and were often reapplied without cleansing. The result? Accumulated mercury exposure disguised as charm. A courtesan named Xiao Yuniong, recorded in later chronicles, was famed for her radiance. She composed her own songs, hosted midnight salons for visiting poets, and was invited to perform for court officials. Her blush was said to shine even in low light. What admirers did not know, or chose not to see, was that Yuniang frequently suffered from tremors in her hands. Her tongue sometimes stiffened. Mid-verse, she developed periodic confusion, unable to recall the words to songs she had written herself. Her attendants called it exhaustion. Her peers called it mystery. But the truth was more chemical than poetic. She was dying slowly of mercury poisoning, a fate shared by many in her profession. The paradox of cinnabar was that it preserved and destroyed. It granted a glow that made one unforgettable. It painted life onto tired skin. It made aging women seem young again, not in health, but in hue. And yet, it silenced nerves, weakened muscles, fogged memory, and in time, unmade the woman entirely. And no one dared to question it, because if a courtesan lost her looks, she lost her value. If she lost her value, she lost her freedom. And if she lost her freedom, she became little more than a possession, owned, passed around, or discarded. So they continued, even when lips burned, even when tongues swelled, even when the nights grew longer and the lights seemed too bright. There is a quiet scene in the Yayangzazus, an ancient collection of anecdotes and strange tales of a woman who believed she had been possessed by spirits. She was said to wander the streets at night, mumbling poems, her skin red and feverish. Locals said she had been cursed by a jealous lover, but scholars now believe she was likely suffering from cinnabar, delirium, a condition caused by prolonged exposure to mercury compounds that affects memory, behavior, and cognition. In life, she was a mystery. In death, she became a footnote, and her face, her beautiful red face, faded quickly from the memory of the city. It is important to remember that cinnabar was not only cosmetic, it was cultural. It was written into poetry, compared to autumn, leaves, plum blossoms, or the glow of sunset. It was tied to status. Cinnabar was expensive, difficult to mine, and even harder to refine. Only women in elite circles, courtesans, nobles, and the emperor's consorts could afford it in pure form. It was even offered to the dead as part of funerary rites, and perhaps that's what makes it so haunting. Cinnabar was always about transformation. In Taoist alchemy, it was meant to transform the body. In beauty, it transformed the face. And in death, it transformed the memory. So the women of Chang'an continued to apply it, night after night, layer upon layer, not because they were vain, but because the world offered them a cruel exchange. Disappear, paint your poverty, or paint yourself into legend. And one is left to wonder, how brightly must a woman shine before the world admits it watched her burn? Asterisk, it is just before twilight, and the courtesans of Changan are preparing their faces once more. The painted chambers flicker, with light from oil lamps hung in carved wood lanterns. Beneath embroidered drapes, small bowls are arranged neatly, one for rouge, one for lip stain, one for the fine crimson powder that gives their cheeks the warmth of peonies and bloom. The powder has no scent, but its presence fills the room. This is cinnabar again, the same mercury sulfide compound mined from the mountains of Sichuan or traded through routes from distant Yunnan, refined by hand, ground in silence, rubbed across the cheeks and lips of women who must never be seen to sweat or age or ache. And as the lamps glow and the faces take shape, something deeper begins to settle, something not quite seen but known, a kind of slow sinking, a heaviness behind the beauty dot in the green willow house, a famed pavilion of the city. A courtesan named Li Jingshu is considered among the most graceful in the capital. She does not sing loudly, she does not laugh openly. She is a whisper in silk dot. Her blush is always perfect, the soft red of dried petals. She applies cinnabar in thin lines across her cheeks, smudged upward and outward toward the temples. It's meant to evoke the drunken look, a poetic ideal in Tangira aesthetics, where beauty was not composed, but blurred, as if love or wine had just passed through. It is not simply makeup, it is art, but beneath the ritual, Li Jingshu keeps secrets. Her joints have begun to swell. Her vision blurs in the morning. She sometimes forgets the names of familiar visitors. The house manager has noticed, but says nothing. After all, she still draws the wealthiest patrons. Her name is whispered in poetry, and her letters are kept by minor officials like sacred charms. Still, her body is changing. She has started to stammer in conversations. Once, while plucking a chin, her fingers froze mid-chord. She laughed it off. A cramp, she said. Too much wine. But her servant girl, May, has begun counting the small tremors. She records them in her own mind, like tally marks. And always there is the blush, always the red glow, dot, as if each evening performance was lit, not by lanterns, but by mercury. Medical understanding at the time was advanced in many ways. Temps physicians recorded surgical techniques, mapped meridians, and catalogued hundreds of herbs. They knew that cinnabar could be dangerous if ingested improperly, but applied to the skin, it was rarely questioned. The effects were explained away. Tremors were blamed on ghost wind, an imbalance in the body's internal energy. Fatigue was seen as emotional excess. Rashes and swelling were dismissed as signs of overwork or passion. The very symptoms of mercury toxicity were reinterpreted as signs of romantic melancholy. A woman losing her voice. She is heartsick. A woman unable to sleep. She is touched by longing. A woman whose hands shake. She is consumed by love. The poison wore the costume of poetry. And yet, the symptoms grew harder to ignore. May began to see the difference between the younger courtesans, who applied cinnabar sparingly as accent, and the older women whose faces had absorbed years of pigment. Year after year, their skin no longer breathed. It grew stiff, almost shell-like, beneath the blush. Their eyes appeared glossy, not with youth, but with fever. Some coughed blood in the mornings, a thread of red that matched their lips. Still, they went on, because there were no choices, no alternatives, no models of beauty that allowed for real life to show on the face. Li Zhenshu begins sleeping longer. Between performances, she sometimes awakens with numbness in her legs. Her teeth ache. Her maid powders her neck to hide the yellowing of the skin. She has started to write her poems in shorter lines. She forgets verses halfway through. Still, the patrons call her luminous. Still, they remark that her presence is like plum blossoms falling into wine. Still, she wears the cinnabar, because to not wear it, to appear barefaced, warm-skinned, honest, would be a kind of social nakedness, an indecency greater than anything else. The irony is sharp. The very compound that made these women shine, pin candlelight, also shortened their lives. And yet, their deaths were rarely attributed to the pigment. Instead, they were called frail, touched by sadness, too sensitive for the world. Some were immortalized in poems that praised their tragic beauty, not realizing they were mourning the effects of mercury. Others faded without remark, replaced by new girls with fresh skin and brighter blush. The powder bowl remained full. The rituals continued, and nothing changed, except the names dot in Taoist temples. Cinnabar remained a sacred element. Monks used it to mark talismans. Alchemists mixed it with gold in the pursuit of immortality. They, too, often died early, confused, shaking, hearts swollen with mercury. But for women like Li Zhenshu, there was no alchemical promise of eternal life, only the evening's applause, the glow in the eyes of a visiting official, the moment in the mirror before the fever rose again, and then the next performance. There is one poem, later attributed to her. If I must vanish, let it be in bloom, not as a petal, but as the blush on your cheek, that fades with morning, that stains the skin long after I'm gone. She never saw it published, but it was found in her room, beside her powder jar, after she passed. So many women passed this way. Their names were lost, their poems unsigned, their faces remembered only by the blush that killed them. And we are left to ask, when a society calls a poison sacred, how can a woman ever call her pain real? Asterisk, it was said that the courtesans of Chang'an never aged. Their skin stayed luminous, their lips forever red, their eyes dark and glistening, like lacquered ink. And yet those who knew them closely, the servants, the musicians, the seamstresses, who mended their robes, knew better. They watched the small signs, the trembling cups, the bowed heads, the days spent under thick quilts, silent but burning with fever. Still, the myth of their perfection endured. because the myth was easier to worship than the truth. By the final decades of the Temps dynasty, cinnabar had become so deeply woven into elite beauty culture that its dangers could no longer be extracted without unraveling the entire aesthetic. Even the women who grew ill did not always protest. They sometimes welcomed the weakening dot. To be frail was elegant. To be pale and quiet was refined. To suffer gently, with red cheeks and a calm gaze, was the very image of womanly grace. And so, even as the symptoms grew sharper, as more collapsed from mysterious fevers, or became incoherent after fits of tremors, the red dust continued to be passed down from older women to younger ones, from one vanity table to the next, from memory to performance. In a small account book from a physician in Luoyang, there is a list of remedies for women's ailments, common among performers and courtesans. Several of the entries involve treating chronic fatigue, skin peeling on the face, bleeding gums, loss of voice, involuntary tears from the eyes. The physician recommends cooling teas, deer antler tonics, acupuncture. Not once does he mention cinnabar, not because he does not suspect it, but because he cannot name it without challenging the entire structure of beauty and status that surrounds his clients. So the silence continues. 100 years later, during the Song dynasty, there are shifts. New pigments emerge, plant-based rouges made from safflower and mulberry, blushes from crushed redwood, safer and softer, begin appearing in household manuals. But still, cinnabar persists, because nothing quite matched its depth, its weight, its ability to render a face unforgettable under the dim glow of a lantern, even as new scholars began noting its risks, even as poets gently mocked the red-faced ghosts of the past. Many women continued to apply it, if not for longevity, then for the moment, because sometimes the illusion of beauty was more powerful than its reality. Asterisk, in her final year, Li Jiangsu lost her voice entirely. The performances stopped. Visitors became infrequent. The young girls whispered about her, not cruelly, but distantly, as one might speak of an ancestor still walking among them. Her hands, once fluid with the chin, curled slightly at the fingers, and yet every morning her maid continued the ritual. Powder, bowl, silk pad, blush to the cheek. Even in silence she glowed. Even in decline she wore the red. Asterisk. She passed away quietly in the early hours before the lanterns were lit. Her body was dressed in her favorite robe, pale jade, with cloud-like embroidery at the sleeves. Her lips were stained one last time with cinnabar. She was buried in a shared garden, not a grand tomb, but a corner plot near a plum grove. And at her stone, someone left a brush wrapped in red silk and a folded poem. Do not speak of ghosts who danced. Speak, instead of color, of the red that made them eternal. And what by of the others? The forgotten women, the unnamed faces in paintings, the countless courtesans whose lives were drawn in mercury, sealed in blush and lost in smoke. They remain in fragments, in the faint red traces on scrolls, in the lingering references in poems, in the quiet rumors passed through centuries. Historians debate the scale, chemists measure the risks, anthologies praise their artistry. But the truth, the aching, burning truth, is simpler. They died to be beautiful, and the world let them. Even today, cinnabar is sold in powdered form across markets in China. Though its cosmetic use is now restricted, it is used for seals, for religious texts, for symbolic red ink, but rarely, openly, for the skin. And yet, its legacy remains in every beauty standard that demands sacrifice, in every product that promises transformation through pain, in every society that praises the glow but ignores the cost. Because what was cinnabar really? Not just a pigment, but a question. How long can a woman burn herself to shine before the world feels the heat? Asterisk, you are in Paris, sometime around the year 1783. The air is dense with perfume, even in the cobbled alleys. Among the rushes and refuse, you can catch a whiff of orange blossom, musk, rosewater, and something sharper, almost metallic. This is not the scent of nature. It is the scent of wealth, of powdered wigs, starched lace, and glittering salons, of noble women who glide, powdered and perfumed, through halls lit by chandeliers, speaking in half-dash-sized dot. And behind this fragrant haze is a secret ingredient rarely mentioned and almost never questioned: arsenic perfume. By the late 18th century, was not simply a luxury in France. It was a necessity. The court of Versailles had no functioning plumbing. The streets of Paris were layered in waste. The idea of clean was a construct, and smell was its illusion. A noblewoman might bathe once a month, but she would be scented every hour. Layers of perfume were applied, not just to the body, but to clothing, gloves, handkerchiefs, even fans. A lady's room was filled with glass bottles, some cut like jewels, others plain and dark to protect their volatile contents. Among the ingredients, lavender, neroli, ambergris, civet, alcohol, arsenic, trioxide not, always listed, not always, understood, but present. Used for its fixative properties, arsenic helped scents linger longer on the skin, intensified floral notes, and added a sharp edge that elevated even the most modest formula. Why arsenic? Because at the time, the line between chemistry and alchemy was still blurred. Arsenic was used in pigments, cleaning agents, cosmetics, and even medicine. In small doses, it was believed to invigorate the skin and purify the blood. Applied topically, it was said to smooth the complexion, reduce swelling, and brighten the face in perfume. It acted as a binder, helping oils stick to the skin rather than fade into the air. And more importantly, it had no immediate scent of its own. This made it invisible, undetectable, perfect, until, of course, it began to build up. A woman named Madame de Fougères, a minor noble from the Loire region, kept dozens of bottles arranged along her mirrored dressing table. She was not wealthy enough to frequent Versailles, but she maintained appearances and scents with religious precision. Each morning, She would dust her skin with a fine, scented powder, a mix of orris root, starch, and a small amount of arsenical white. Then she would layer her perfumes, a citrus base, a floral heart, a musky undertone, each fixed with a drop of enhancer prepared by her trusted local perfumer. By her mid-30s, Madame de Fogers had developed a persistent cough. Her physician diagnosed it as nervous irritation. She also suffered from swollen gums, hair thinning, and pale fingernails. And still, the perfumes were applied, because her scent was her signature, because a lady who did not smell expensive was assumed to be dying, or worse. The culture of scented danger reached its peak at the court of Louis XVI. Their perfume was an art form. Women competed for the most distinct, most intoxicating blend. Custom perfumes were composed in secrecy, formulas written in cipher, passed in hidden notes, protected like state secrets. Perfumers like Jean-Louis Fargen, who created scents. For Marie Antoinette used over 100 ingredients in a single bottle. Among the oils and resins were trace chemicals, binding agents and stabilizers, some of which were mildly toxic, others deeply so. And while arsenic was never the star of the show, it was often the quiet supporting actor. It made floral notes bloom longer. It kept scents from turning sour. Perfume cling to the skin, even as it slowly seeped through it. Women complained of headaches, of rashes along the neckline, of dizziness after prolonged application. Some blamed the wigs, others blamed the corsets. No one blamed the scent, because in France, perfume was identity. It was how a woman marked her entrance, how she controlled a room, how she erased the natural and replaced it with art and arsenic. Arsenic was just another tool. There is a letter penned by an unknown lady of the court, preserved in the archives of a small provincial library. It reads, "The Countess has taken to her rosewater again, though it made her faint last week. She says it is worth the spell, for it keeps her young. She no longer smells of anything but roses. I wonder if roses always smelled like this." The Countess died in her sleep 2 months later. No cause was given, but her scent lingered. And so we must ask, how long will a society cling to its illusions, when the price is measured not in coin, but in breath? The court of Versailles was built on illusion. The palace shimmered, gilded frames, endless mirrors, and floral arrangements masked the rot underneath of politics, of sanitation, of the human body itself. And nowhere was this illusion more fragile, more layered than in perfume. Each noblewoman bore her own private weather system, a halo of scent, a curated atmosphere, and within that invisible arsenic, not enough to kill quickly, just enough to slowly unmake the body while preserving the air around it. The perfumer's table in 18th century. Paris was more chemistry lab than flower garden. There were petals, yes, jasmine from grass, neroli from Tunisia, rose attar, steeped in copper stills, but also tinctures, acids, powders with labels faded or intentionally obscured, and in many cases, arsenic trioxide or white arsenic. This powder, bright and fine, mixed beautifully. It bound volatile oils. It stabilized floral compounds. And when combined with alcohol or fat, it created an emulsion that clung to linen, lace, and flesh. The danger wasn't that it poisoned on contact, but that it built slowly, week by week, drop by drop, until scent itself became the carrier. Douve decay dot Madame de Fogas, now nearing 40, had begun to experience more dramatic symptoms. The soft tissues inside her mouth were pale and sore. She could not tolerate bright light. Her pulse fluttered unpredictably. Her breath, once her signature, scented with heliotrope and lemon verbena, had taken on a sour edge that no perfume could mask. She consulted a physician, who offered boiled bark and rest. She consulted a priest, who suggested prayer and fasting. She never consulted her perfumer, because to question her perfumes would be to question her place in the world. Her scent was her standing, her worth, her declaration. If she stopped applying it, what would she become? The paradox at the heart of French perfumery was this: the more a woman suffered from her scent, the more refined she was believed to be. Delicate skin. She must be noble. Sensitivity to light, the price of cultured living. A faintness in the lungs. Proof she did not work, did not labor, did not sweat. And so the side effects of arsenical perfume were recast, from warnings into compliments. A pale countenance, a romantic disposition, fatigue, a sure sign of refinement, dizziness, surely the heart fluttering with poetic feeling. Illness became style, sickness became seduction. It was not just women. Men at court also wore perfumes, heavy blends of spice, musk, and civet. Many applied scented powders to their wigs and gloves. Some used arsenical creams to brighten their complexions, to appear smooth, soft, and hairless. And yet, the language of complaint remained gendered. When men became ill, they were pitied. When women became ill, they were admired, provided they continued to smile and smell sweet. Asterisk in an apothecary's record from Lyon. A recipe is preserved, a scent of lilies, to be applied to the wrists and temples, requires almond oil, spirits of wine ground, lily root, powdered arsenic, not exceeding 1/4 grain per dram, a silver spoon for stirring, never iron. The note concludes, delightful when worn near the neck or below the ear. 2. Be kept from children and the melancholy. It does not explain why. Asterisk. And yet, even as rumors spread of women fainting at the opera, of courtiers losing teeth, of sudden fevers that resisted treatment, the perfume industry thrived. New blends were released. Essences were named after queens, rivers, musical terms. Scent became narrative. A woman could now tell her story through fragrance. The innocence of lavender, to the daring of patchouli, the mystery of amber, and in each tale, a little arsenic whispered beneath the top notes. Madame de Fogas, now mostly confined to her drawing room, would still perfume her letters. Her handwriting had grown shaky, her sentences shorter, but the envelopes smelled of lilac and sandalwood. Friends remarked how youthful her correspondence remained. They never asked why she wrote sitting down, or why her fingers sometimes bled, because they couldn't smell that only. The violets only the powder, only the past, preserved in scent. Meanwhile, on the streets of Paris, another kind of woman wore arsenic, not powdered, perfumed, or powdered in pearls, but mixed into cheap face creams sold by wandering vendors, promised as a cure for freckles, blemishes, or unseemly coarseness. The upper classes suffered in salons. The lower classes suffered in silence. But the poison was democratic. It cared little for lace or title. The revolution would soon begin. But for now, the halls of Versailles still shimmered, and women still leaned in for a final dab of perfume. 2 wrists, 2 neck, 2 bodice, before walking into the salon, breathing in the sweetness, breathing out the danger, and never asking what part of this scent is me, and what part is slow undoing. Asterisk, the final months of Madame de Foga's life were marked by stillness. She no longer received visitors. Her walks in the garden ceased. Her mirrors were covered, not out of superstition, but because her skin, once pale and luminous, had begun to flake and bruise. Her hair fell out in thin threads. Her hands, which once held silk fans and delicately perfumed handkerchiefs, now trembled constantly. Her perfume bottles remained on her dressing table, untouched, yet never discarded, because even when the body failed, the ritual remained to wash, to powder, to scent. Her maid, loyal but quiet, would still prepare the blend each morning. A drop of citrus oil, a whiff of crushed rose, and, out of habit, or perhaps belief, the same small pinch of the white powder that made it all last longer. She never asked why Madame's gums bled, or why her vision had narrowed, or why she wept without cause, because she, too, believed in the scent, in its power to elevate, to transport, to mask not only odor but decay. The truth of arsenic in perfume remained largely invisible to the public until the 19th century. With the rise of industrial chemistry, researchers began analyzing common cosmetics and scents. Arsenic was found in face powders, soaps, and colognes. Reports surfaced linking long-term exposure to symptoms that now had names: peripheral neuropathy, dermatitis, organ damage. Even so, public awareness lagged behind science. In 1821, a French chemist named Pierre Roberquet published a treatise on cosmetic toxins. He warned against continued use of compounds like arsenic and lead in beautifying agents. Some formulas were banned, certain products withdrawn. But the deeper cultural logic, the belief in transformation through invisible suffering, persisted. Perfume remained a marker of femininity, and femininity in France remained tied to control over the body's natural state. Control at any cost. By then, Madame de Foga's was long buried. Her estate catalogue listed perfumes among her belongings, over 60 bottles in varying sizes, some with gold leaf labels, others with cracked glass stoppers. Many were still half full. One vial was marked only powder fixante, fixative powder, the same term perfumers had used for generations, never quite saying what was inside. Her final portrait, painted shortly before her illness, made it impossible. To sit shows a woman with a faint smile, eyes shaded by lashes, and cheeks touched with the softest blush of pink. She appears healthy, serene, timeless, and that is how she is remembered, not in the stillness of her final years, but in the illusion. She wore a scent, a glow, an absence of flaw. What no one saw was the slow price she paid, the years lost to fatigue, the evenings missed in bed, the painful quiet where laughter once lived. Perfume, by the end of the 19th century, began to shift. Safer ingredients replaced arsenic in most formulas. Alcohol-based scents became lighter, cleaner, less cloying. Industrial regulations crept into production. Women could now wear fragrance without inviting chemical harm, at least not in the same way. But even today, traces remain not just in formula, but in habits, in expectations, in the way a scent is still sold as a promise to smell like memory, like innocence, like mystery, like someone you're not. There is an echo, too, in every modern perfume ad. The whispered voice, the slow motion, movement, the suggestion that a scent can rewrite the body. It is no longer arsenic, but the dream is the same. To cover, to become, to disappear beneath something sweeter. So what, then, did arsenic perfume teach us? Not just about danger, but about desire, that to be admired. Many women were taught to poison themselves gently, and to smile as they did, because the world never asked, "What is this doing to you?" It only asked, "What do you smell like?" Asterisk, the stone walls are warm. They breathe softly, fogged by centuries of steam. Flickering lamplight catches in the marble tiles, and water trickles in small, rhythmic echoes. This is the hammam, the ceremonial bath of the Ottoman harem, and tonight it is filled with silence, incense, and secrets. You are in Topkapi Palace, in the heart of 17th century Constantinople, behind veils and closed doors, beneath domes, carved with floral patterns and pierced by small glass stars. The women of the Sultan's court move like shadows in heat. Some are whispering, others are motionless, and some are quietly enduring the sting of a ritual meant to perfect their skin. The bath is not a place of rest. It is a place of transformation and pain. To be part of the harem is to be part of a world apart, not simply a gathering of concubines, as Western myths suggest, but a deeply structured, politically charged, and highly competitive court of elite women, wives, mothers, tutors, attendants, and girls chosen for their beauty, intelligence, and adaptability. And within this world, a woman's value is in part decided by her skin, pale, even-toned, smooth, unblemished, a canvas of control, a face that reflects composure, a body trained in grace, and the foundation of that appearance begins here. In the bath, with soaks, scrubs, polishes, and masks unlike anything found outside the palace. The heat is intense. The hammam is designed to soften the body. Every pore opens, muscles loosen, hair becomes pliable, skin almost defenseless. And then the work begins. First, the scrubbing. A coarse mitt made of camel hair or copper thread is used to exfoliate the body. The skin reddens. Sometimes it breaks. This is seen as purification. Girls must not cry out. Crying implies weakness. Then the depilatory paste, a mixture known as rasma. It is made from quicklime and arsenic sulfide, a thick, chalky substance that burns as it removes hair, applied to legs, underarms, and intimate areas. It causes a stinging heat that no amount of cold, water can immediately soothe. The pain is normal. It is part of the ritual. It means the paste is working. The bath, attendants, often older women, once part of the harem themselves, supervise every step. They say little. They have seen girls scream, faint, vomit. They apply the paste carefully, wait the allotted minutes, and then rinse it away with bowls of cold water. But the burning does not always stop. Some women develop rashes, others lose patches of skin. Many are left raw for days, unable to sit, unable to sleep. Still, the process repeats each week, for years, for a lifetime. Because smoothness is not a luxury, it is a requirement. After depilation comes the soaping scented olive oil soaps, black soap paste, sometimes laced with sulfur. Then a rinse in rosewater or vinegar. Then the masking dot clays imported from Damascus, crushed pearls mixed with honey, lemon juice and egg white to tighten. Sometimes finely ground lead powder to brighten the skin temporarily, though at great long-term cost. Women lie still on heated stone slabs, their faces coated in mixtures that sting and sting. It is said that the most beautiful among them rarely flinch. The irony, of course, is that few of these women are seen by men. The harem is a sealed world. Only the Sultan, his mother the valid Sultan, and the highest-ranking eunuchs may enter. But the competition within is intense. The hierarchy is steep. A woman's beauty can elevate her from servant to concubine, from concubine to consort, from consort to queen mother. But it can also vanish overnight. A single blemish, a swollen eye, or a patch of burned skin could change her path forever. So they bathe, they scrub, they burn. They smile through it. Asterisk, there is a quiet tragedy in the weekly procession to the bath girls, as young as 12. Women in their 40s, hoping to remain visible, all subjected to the same scalding steam, the same acid pastes, the same whispered warnings about how long to leave the powder on the cheeks before it eats the skin. There are no complaints. Pain is assumed, expected. To suffer silently is to show strength. Asterisk. Historians would later write about the opulence of the harem, the fountains, the silks, the perfumes, the music, but they rarely wrote about the chemical agony of the baths. Perhaps because it wasn't considered unusual, or because the silence been what expected, or because beauty, to them, was the only part worth preserving. But the arsenic was there, the lime, the lead, the salt that entered broken skin, and made even breathing hurt. And we must ask, when beauty becomes pain, and pain becomes ritual, what part of the woman survives the process? Asterisk, it is morning again in top copy. A thin veil of mist hangs over the courtyard. The stone of the hammam has already been warmed. Deep within its marble belly, women begin to undress. There is no speaking, no sound but the echo of dripping water and the rustle of linen. This is not a social bath. It is not leisure. It is preparation. Because in the harem, your body is your biography. The smoothness of your arms, the evenness of your tone, the absence of hair, odor, or mark. These are your qualifications, and the bath is where you earn them. A girl named Dilruba, newly arrived from the Caucasus, sits on the edge of the warm stone. Her skin is pale, her eyes wide, her Turkish still halting. She is perhaps 13. She does not yet know how long to sit in the steam, how to balance between softening the pores and fainting from heat. An older attendant, Halim Hatton, begins her instruction. The girl is scrubbed with keys. A rough mitt. The mitt opens the skin. It removes not just dirt, but any illusion that softness is enough. Beauty in this place is built through abrasion, through pain, through endurance. Dilruba's cheeks flush. She does not cry, but her breath stutters. Next, Halim mixes the depilatory paste. Rasma, quicklime, crushed orpiment, arsenic, sulfide, and starch. Blended into a grayish cream dot. It is smeared onto Dilruba's limbs, her underarms, her most intimate. Skin dot, and then the wait begins. No one speaks of the danger aloud, but every woman here knows it. They have seen the burns, the chemical scars that pucker and shine under moonlight, the faint lines across the inner thigh where the paste was left. A moment too long. Some women develop permanent hypersensitivity. Others lose pigmentation, and a few those with unlucky skin or overzealous hand-scary marks. They hide under robes and veils, yet they return, week after week, because the alternative is being overlooked, and in the harem, invisibility is a kind of death after the paste is removed. Dilruba is soaked in cold water. Her skin burns, but she smiles faintly, because Halim smiles. Because this, she has been told, is success. She is wrapped in cotton, dried, and laid down for the final phase. Masking tot today. It is a paste of lemon, egg white, and lead powder said to brighten and firm. She lies still, not knowing what the lead will do, only knowing that if she impresses the chamber stewardess, she may be selected for embroidery lessons, that if her skin holds up through the month, she may be chosen to attend a court banquet, that if she glows, she might rise. Elsewhere in the hammams, a different woman applies a sulfur paste to her elbows. It stings, but she has learned to keep her face composed. She has seen too many others fail. A wince can cost everything, even outside the palace, across the Ottoman Empire. Variations of these rituals persist in the bathhouses of Damascus. Cairo, Bursa. Women undergo similar procedures. Some use plaster of Paris instead of lime. Others mix arsenic with goat's milk. Recipes are passed from mother to daughter, from mistress to maid, always with the same quiet warning. Leave it on, but not too long. If it itches, it's working. Don't breathe too deeply. Some women escape with only redness, others with skin that never heals. The strange contradiction is this. Many of the women applying these pastes, mixing, timing, rinsing, know they are dangerous. They are not fools. They have seen the results, the infections, the trembling hands, the infertility, the deaths no one attributes to arsenic, but everyone fears in private, and still they continue. Not because they believe the substances are safe, but because they believe there is no safer path to power. A woman named Fairy, once favored by a prince, now scrubs feet for younger girls. She was beautiful once, until a depilatory paste, left too long, burned the tops of her thighs. The skin blackened. She healed slowly. Her selection ceased. No one told her to leave. But the bath mat was no longer laid out for her. Her comb was replaced with a smaller one. Her mirrors removed. Now she watches others rise and flinch and keeps smiling. And she whispers, "Count, never guess. 5 minutes, no more." But not all listen. Some are too eager, too desperate, too convinced that perfection lies just one more layer of paste away. Dilruba's bath ends with rose oil. She is told to lie still for an hour. Her skin shines. The burns are mild. The redness will fade. She is praised for her silence. No one mentions the arsenic. No one mentions the damage beneath the surface. No one needs to. It is understood, because in this world, beauty is not the absence of pain. It is the mastery of it. And one might ask, if you are trained to suffer in silence from the age of 13, how will you ever recognize violence in anything that feels familiar? Asterisk, the harem did not exist to produce beauty. It existed to produce control. And beauty, it turned out, was one of the most efficient instruments of that control, because it could be taught, measured, ranked, and enforced. And the women who achieved it were rewarded just enough to keep others compliant. They called them the favored, but they were, more accurately, the most obedient dot in the high chambers of Topkapi, where moonlight spilled across tiled domes and the smell of musk clung to silk hangings. The beauty rituals reached their final, most punishing form. Here, women were no longer just bathed and scrubbed. They were painted every day. The mixtures were elaborate. Ground pearls, crushed coral, blended amber and cloves. And always, always, some toxic element just beneath the surface. Lead carbonate to whiten the skin. Belladonna to widen the pupils. antimony for eyeliner so black it could mark a woman, tears in ink. The process was not unlike preparing a canvas. The body was stripped, smoothed, primed, and decorated until it no longer felt like flesh, until it looked like something that could be owned. A woman named Nergis had become a favorite. She was not the most beautiful in the room, but she learned the art of ritual submission. She arrived early to the baths. She never flinched at the paste. She memorized her timings. 5 minutes for Rusma, 10 for the lemon mask. Exactly 2 strokes of the lead brush across the cheekbone. She looked the part of power, but she never mistook it for safety. One winter, she developed a tremor in her right hand. She told no one, but her handwriting changed. Her stitching grew uneven. Her spoon shook slightly as she stirred her tea. The harem physician, trained in both medicine and discretion, recognized the signs at once. Lead poisoning. She prescribed lesser powders, herbal rinses, and fasting. But Nergis knew what it meant. She had outlasted other favorites by staying perfectly still. Now her body was rebelling. Outside the palace, physicians were beginning to speak quietly of the dangers of such beauty. In medical texts copied in Damascus and translated from Latin, warnings were circulated. White lead creates pallor at the cost of the blood. Arsenic poisons not only the skin, but the wound. Sulfur applied to cracked skin may infect the organs. Belladonna enlarges the eyes, but blurs the vision permanently. But these were not the voices that held weight in the palace. There, the opinion of a court eunuch, or the fleeting favor of a sultan, could override centuries of medicine. And so the women continued. They learned not just the rituals, but the reasons for them: to please the sultan, to be chosen for a feast, to gain access to the poetry readings in the upper gardens, to earn the right to dress the sultan's mother. Small privileges bind thousands of women to obedience for lifetimes, but not all complied. Some resisted quietly. A woman named G. Ellison, older now, perhaps 30, had stopped applying the arsenic paste. She used olive oil instead of rose mercury. Her skin darkened slightly. Her cheeks no longer glowed blue-white in the candlelight. She was demoted from the perfume room to the fabric storehouse. There was no announcement, just fewer eyes, fewer silks, less conversation. But she did not resume the pastes. She said nothing. She only nodded, and kept her olive oil hidden in a small ceramic jar under her bedroll. Across the empire, a quiet revolution of substitution, buys taking place. Women in smaller cities outside Istanbul began replacing Rusma with sugar wax, swapping powdered lead for crushed almonds, using vinegar instead of lemon and lime. It was slow, it was uneven, but it happened because the logic of pain had finally become visible. And once you see the pattern, the mask of beauty as a mirror of submission, it is hard to unsee it. But in top copy, the mirror remained. Nergis' tremor worsened. She was reassigned to the spice kitchens, a soft demotion. Still inside the palace, but outside the eye of selection. She lived another 7 years. Her skin faded, her posture curved. She no longer touched the powders. Instead, she wrote in small, secret letters on scraps of cloth and the margins of herbal ledgers. She wrote, "Beauty was not our sin. It was their leash. I did not survive because I was beautiful. I survived because I knew when to stop. Tell the girls, the pain is not holy. It is just pain." By the 19th century, foreign observers began to write of the Ottoman harem with fascination, misunderstanding nearly everything